A lot of churches struggle to keep young adults. If that's you, stick around right now for the Church Revitalization Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast, brought to you by the Malphurs Group team, where each week we tackle important, actionable topics to help churches thrive. And now, here's your hosts, Scott Ball and A.J. Mathieu.
Welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast. My name is Scott Ball. I'm joined by my friend and co-host, A.J. Mathieu.
Woohoo, the one and only. Here I am. Let's go. Is that a little too self-big?
Yeah, a little bit. It's a little bit of self-aggrandizing, I think they say. Hey, before we get started in today's episode, I want to remind you about the Healthy Churches Toolkit. Go to healthychurchestoolkit.com. Sign up free for 7 days. New version of the toolkit out there. It is a thing to behold. New features, new tools that make your life. I like to think of it personally as a leadership operating system. So managing leaders, managing your strategic plan, as well as some AI tools and things to make ministry life easier, all in one tight package. You can try it out for yourself for free for 7 days at healthychurchestoolkit.com. Check it out.
I helped had a conversation with a pastor yesterday, Scott, helped him get into the toolkit. Here's how he described it. And I quote, genius, end quote.
Wow.
Yeah. That was his assessment of the Healthy Church Toolkit.
That's the kind of enthusiasm we like to hear, people. So if you'd like to experience this stroke of genius yourself, go to healthychurchestoolkit.com.
This is the Ego Podcast today. AJ loves himself and the toolkit.
Exactly.
All right.
Okay.
Churches struggling to keep young adults. We have a lot of historical anecdotal data, probably some actual statistical data, Scott, of decades past that said, hey, people, they graduate from high school, they become disengaged, they rejoin the church later when they get married, start having kids, and they're like, oh, yeah, that was good. I need to get back into that. So we got this college age or maybe 20-somethings gap in the church. Seems like there's been a bit of a shift back, and we're finding this age group becoming maybe more engaged or less going away, or maybe for a shorter period of time.
Right.
But it's an issue in a lot of churches. This is a bit of a missing middle section for churches. This demographic, I think it also has a lot to do with where you are, maybe the demography or geography of your church. How much college opportunity is there nearby? How much work is there nearby for young people to be able to engage in? So there's a lot of factors to this, but it's something that I think a lot of pastors and church leaders can relate to.
Well, and this is maybe a harsh thing or hard thing to say or to hear, but even if it's true that an increasing number of younger people are willing to go to church, it doesn't mean that they necessarily want to go to yours.
Oh.
And that has largely been the experience, I think, for a lot of churches. And they're going, well, what are we doing? I mean, why don't the young people want to come to our church? And I think that the first maybe wrong response to that, we're going to get into the real reasons. We're about to do that. But let me tell you what it's not. It's not that you aren't cool enough. I think the initial reaction is, well, we don't have the budget for all the lights and the fog and the coffee shop. And if we were just cooler, then that would solve the problem. And the young people would want to go here. And I don't know. I mean, maybe some people then would want to, but I don't think that there isn't a lot of evidence to suggest that if you were to magically have, an extra $500,000 in your account and you could do this massive renovation of your facility and put in new sound system and coffee bar, that people would just randomly the young people would just flock in. There's not evidence to suggest that. I don't think those are the real reasons. So we're going to get into the real reasons and then some fixes.
Yeah. Okay. So a couple of reasons and a couple of fixes for you. The first reason is that there's a lack of responsibility offered to the age group. What that means is you're not letting them actually get in and become leaders in the church. They're I don't know, and I don't know if that's maybe even a not a conscious decision. It's just like, we've known this kid since he was 3. He came up through
Hmm.
pre-K, just graduated a couple of years ago.
Hmm.
We can't possibly have him be a leader in the church, and this is wrong thinking.
Or they
So
go, he is a leader. He does the slides.
he's been doing it since he was 14.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, not that, every 23-year-old needs to become an elder. We're not saying that
No,
either.
no, no.
But we've got, and I guess if that's all we have is greeter, slide operator, and elder, then we probably have other issues going on in the church. But there's got to be a space in which we can start to develop people as leaders. And starting in this age group is a great place to start, because we do have statistics on the engagement by people over long periods of time when they actually feel invested in a church, and they're actually in serving in spaces that are in good alignment for them and their gifting and things like that. The earlier we start, the more integrated they're likely to be for a lifetime.
Yeah, it's so true. I think so. Here's kind of a hot take. Like think about at age 28 or 25. These people they're in their careers now. They've graduated from college. They've started a career, and depending on the person, I mean, they may be running their own company at this point. In today's day and age, they might have like started something, or they're a manager of something. But at your church, they're not even allowed to sit in on a deacon meeting. Like we have a real problem. We're creating these barriers for entry, and so to your point, AJ, and we'll talk more about this in a second. So I don't want to get too far into it, but if people feel like, well, yeah, there's a class for me, but there's not a real on ramp to leadership. Again, we're not saying you got to rubber stamp every person into a leadership position, but if they don't even see an on ramp into leadership at the church, then they're going to go somewhere else where there is the possibility of having more influence, or getting more deeply engaged, or being able to have their voice heard in a more significant way. Um, I don't think that I just want to be clear on this, AJ. I don't think that every young person has to have some high level role. I'm not suggesting that. But if people have this sense that I'm not being taken seriously, you're not listening to me, I'm not being heard, then
Mhm.
they're going to leave. They're going to go somewhere else.
Yeah. Well, in other aspects, we consider this level of diversity. I mean, if our church is in a geographic space that's like, racially diverse, culturally diverse, and we feel like God is calling us truly to reach these people, we would normally expect, yeah, we want to begin integrating a diversity of people in leadership roles. I mean, that
Yeah.
would really demonstrate that we truly are a diverse church. This is kind of the same thing in a slightly nuanced way. Would young people coming to our church feel like this is a church for them, and that they would be able to serve in areas that they might have strengths, if everybody is gray haired and over age 70
Hmm.
in all of the leadership capacity in the church. So I think this is something that we need to take to heart. Where can people in these younger age groups serve that can demonstrate that we do value them as people made in the image of God, giving gifts by the Holy Spirit, the same as anybody else would have received, their own life experience, their own work experience, and not, even to some degree, discriminating against them because of age.
Yeah. Absolutely. I got nothing to add to that. I think the other reason why that people disengage, and I understand that this is a circular problem. One reason why young people don't go to some churches is they don't see anybody else who's their same age. So there's no real community. But so I don't want to go too far into that. But I do think that just to kind of frame up the problem, if there's only elderly people in the church, then they might go, I don't know if I'm going to be able to connect with anybody. That doesn't mean that there need to be only young people in the church in order for a young person to attend.
Yeah.
It's just if there are none, they start going, ooh, I don't know. And I recognize that this is the situation that a lot of churches are in. They look around and they go, well, everyone here is 65 plus. There aren't any. So how do we get started? Where do we start? And we can talk about that more in a minute, because I recognize that it's a circular problem. There aren't young people, so young people don't want to come. So no, we're not reaching young people because there aren't any. I get that, and we can talk about some solutions to that. But that is a reason that people look around the room and they go, "I don't see anybody my age."
Mhm.
The whole room doesn't have to be their age, but there has to be some community. But equally important, AJ, and we'll talk more about this too, is that they're not finding real, even if they were the only person in their age cohort, are they able to find real community there with the people who are older than them? Are they embracing them, or are they tolerating them? And I don't actually think that's related to the real responsibility question too, but I think that sometimes younger people, when they go to a church with a bunch of older people, they get treated like children
Mm.
rather than embraced and part of the community and real friendship. And I don't know. I I don't get too far into this, but AJ, you and I are not the same age. We
Mhm.
got what
15 years between
15
us.
years between us.
Kind of a half generation. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're Gen X and I'm a
Mhm.
millennial, but I would say that if you and I were didn't know each other at all, and we were attending the same church. We don't live in the same state, so we don't go to church together. But if we started going to the same church, I probably wouldn't immediately reach out and go, "There's a guy. There's a guy that I'm going to hang out with." Because I'd go, "Well, he's a different stage of life than me, and he's different age cohort than I am." But if you and I lived in the same city and we went to the same church, we would hang out together,
Yeah. We
because
would.
we have a real relationship.
Yeah.
Um, and so age doesn't have to mean you can't have real relationship, but it does mean you have to work extra hard and to create the conditions where that relationship can be built.
Mhm.
And that's often what's missing.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So we've identified two reasons that this young adult age group might be struggling to connect to your church. One being there's not a lot of responsibility opportunities, any leadership opportunities, and there may not be any, or at least they may not perceive there's any real community to be had. So let's talk about fixes, Scott. We've got three things to talk about trying to move past this. The first one is giving them some leadership opportunities. So, and I kind of touched on this a moment ago, talking about the reason there should be spaces in your church in which we could engage people at that younger age. Um, but I mean, we also need to be realistic, though. I mean, if we had 20 young adults in our church, there may not be 20 leadership opportunities because things, I mean, especially as you go up in leadership levels in the church, the numbers of positions are going to naturally be fewer. So, and not everybody desires to be a leader or is gifted that way. So, we're not trying to shoehorn every young person into some space in which they could be a decision maker, but there should be space for some at least to be able to engage that way in the church, whether it's leading something in the discipleship area or administrative or something else, um, worship team, whatever that might be. We should be, first of all, not discounting them because of their age, and secondly, actually pursuing,
Mhm.
and hopefully there's relationships that other people can identify, like, this person has some particular strengths that I think would be helpful for us. So, yeah, we got to get them engaged in leadership in the church.
Yeah. So I would go even a step further and say recruit
Yeah.
a handful of young leaders that you feel comfortable and who are qualified to be platformed. So that could be existing people. You might have some young people that you in your church already who don't take an active leadership role that you could tap on the shoulder and say, "Hey, I'd like for you to be in a more visible leadership role." Or if you're in the situation that I was describing a minute ago, where you don't have, I mean, you look around the room and it's everybody 65 plus, then um, it depends on what your situation is. Like if you're part of a denomination, go to your denominational leader and say, "Hey, can I recruit 5 young people from a neighboring church that maybe that has a ton of young people. Maybe there's a church that's got a ton of young people, and there's some young people in that church who would like to have a leadership role, but in that church they can't because those leadership roles are filled up. And they would be happy to come, be engaged in your church and be able to have play in the band, where at their church they can't play in the band because there's already too many people.
Mm.
But here they could come and they could be in the band, or they could lead a Bible study. Over there, all those Bible study leader slots are full, and this is a person who's qualified, but there's not a slot open to them. So you can do this in a temporary basis. This is what we do in church planting: is we say, hey, will you come and be a leader in our church for a year? You don't have to ask them to commit to coming to your church forever, but say, hey, will you come be a leader in our church for a year? I just want to be really clear, though, don't elevate people who are not qualified. So make sure, you have some vetting process, or they come recommended to you by people that you trust or whatever, but either identify or recruit 5 or 10 young people who you could put in visible leadership situations. It doesn't mean they become board members or deacons or any of that, but visible leadership positions in the church, and see if you could get that in 90 days. Could you get 5 or 10 young adults in visible leadership positions? And that'd be the first step.
Yeah. All right. Get them engaged in leadership. The second fix we're going to talk about is building natural connection points for them. So if we perhaps have maybe some amount of people in the age group, but there's not necessarily, we don't feel like they're actually connecting. Maybe last week we talked about discipleship pathway. I mean, maybe they're gathering, they're coming to Sunday services. You see them, maybe there's a handful of them that sit together, but they haven't really engaged in anything else. Well, is there a way that they want to engage? Or have we made opportunities, or maybe even invited them to engage in that so that they can begin to build relationships? Because, let's be honest, Scott. I mean, relationships are what end up really connecting us into a church, right? I mean, we connect with other people,
Yep.
and that happens in a variety of ways. Maybe, a class, a small group, whatever that might be. Serving is a huge one. But that's when people really begin to feel integrated. That's when church becomes like, part of your family. And you really, it's not a question anymore. Like, oh, am I going to go to church or am I not? Like, no, I am, because I'm engaged there and I really am connected with people. So we have to have some natural connection points for them to get engaged.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that can look different in different churches. You know, um, maybe it does mean you start a college and career Bible study or something like that. But it can even be fundamental things like the things that you already offer. Do they match the rhythms of a person who is that age group?
That's a good
Or
question. Hmm.
or are all of your programs oriented towards people who are 65 plus and the post-retirement lifestyle that those people are living? Everything's a Thursday. It's Thursday brunch at 10 a.m. Like, these people are at work, so
Yeah.
they're not going to go to that because it doesn't match their lifestyle. So that goes to that servant heartedness and going, okay, if we want to reach young people, what are the rhythms of young people? And does our programming enable them to actually connect during those times? Or have we, just by proxy, we've pushed them away by scheduling everything at a time that they can't engage with anyway, even if they wanted to come? And so thinking thoughtfully about that, think about doing things like, what if you did Sunday lunch crew every Sunday after church? Somebody who's in that older crowd who's a little better off, they say, hey, I'm going to take 5 people to lunch or whatever. These things got to scale with the size of your church. But if you're a really small church, you got 20 people left, 30 people in your church, host some lunches on Sunday after church and trust me, young people, they're happy to take a free meal.
Free meal.
Yeah, and they'll talk to you. You're paying for lunch? Sure, I'll sit next to you and talk to you about my problems. I mean, those create opportunities to build those real relationships.
Yeah.
I trust Bob. I sat next, he bought my lunch. We talked about life and, he's cool, crazy, I might be a little racist. I'm not sure, but he's hilarious. You know, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you're creating opportunities for that kind of stuff to happen. Whereas, if you're doing it at times that they can't show up, hey, we're going to the caverns on Saturday at 2 p.m. They're not going to do that. So, just
let's
be
not just
thoughtful about
accept that Bob's a racist, by the way. Let me just
I
throw
was,
that in. That's
I said he's maybe a little bit racist.
let's maybe the young people can help coach Bob through that. We can get Bob past that.
Yeah. Just we've all I'm just saying, I hope everybody's laughing and knowing I'm being a little bit facetious, but we've all been in those moments, right, where I'm like, I'm pretty sure you can't say that anymore. Like, Bob's not being racist. He just doesn't. He's not up on what you're allowed to say.
Terms change. Yeah. Acceptable use changes. Probably a lot of us have got a couple of those people in our family. We're like, oh.
I have some examples in mind, but I won't share them.
All right. Well, maybe some authentic relationships can be of benefit to the young people and to Bob.
And
maybe
to Bob.
Bob can grow a little bit.
Bob loves everybody, but he just doesn't know what he can't say.
All right. Our third fix is we could actually ask them what to change, Scott. Isn't that a revolutionary idea?
Yeah.
We could engage with them and find out, how things are really going for you here. What's your impression of and do you have any ideas that we maybe haven't thought of? Because we would love to see you and like your friend group, your peer group, more integrated into our church and thriving. So why don't we do that? Why don't we, if we've got a few of these people, I don't want to say kids, if we've got some people this age in our church, let's have some coffees. Let's schedule some lunches, and don't make it awkward and formal. Be casual and really inquisitive about this. Even that right there, that is almost like a first level of leadership, Scott. You're to inquire about their ideas for the church. You're putting them in a position of a level of authority at that point, because you're telling them that you value their input. That right there might be a real boost. And I would hope they would come away from something like that thinking, well, that's pretty cool that they really wanted to know what I think and if I had any ideas. And who knows where that could go? Maybe something new even gets created, and then you've got a leader built in. But yeah, this would be a valuable use of your time.
Yeah, pretty recently I was with a church, and they're going through this exact challenge, like a lot of churches are. And they're a great church, great people, really humble leaders. And I've got a lot of optimism for them. But we were talking through this issue. One of the things that they mentioned is common in their church, and I think this probably happens more times than we might know, is there are a number of children who attend the church because grandparents of the children take their grandkids to the church, but the parents don't come. And this might be I recognize this might be a difficult conversation to have, but it would be wonderful if those grandparents would talk to their kids whose children they're taking, and say, and ask 3 questions. What would make you stay at the church? And the key is to not be judgmental in asking this. Because if you're taking your grandkids to church and your kid is not coming, that kid probably feels some judgment. Like, I know my parents want me to be coming, but I'm not coming. So it'd be really important to try to not come across judgmental, because that's not the point, is not to make them feel guilty about not coming, but just genuinely curious. What would make you stay? What makes you not want to come? Why don't you want to come? And that's the one that if you say it, they're going to hear that as judgment, but you just be careful. Say, I'm not expecting you to come. The situation, I would love for you to want to come. What would need to be different? So that'd be the third question. It's like, what would you change? If you could change something about our church so that you would want to come, what would that be? I just want to understand. And then shut up and don't respond. When they say, well, it's this, don't respond defensively and say, well, we do this, and this. Well, you're clearly not doing it in a way that they're seeing it. Otherwise, they might have a different feeling. So don't get into an argument with your kids who aren't going to church. Just want to be really clear about that. But you've got people who they're willing to let the grandkids go, but they themselves are not going. There's a reason why. There's a barrier there.
Yeah.
What's that barrier? Find that out. Some investigation.
Yeah, because that's making a statement. I mean, they value church in general. They value the teachings of Jesus. There's an element of value to want to have their kids go. I mean, I suppose they could be atheists and completely apathetic and like, well, we don't care. It's fake anyway. If the kids have fun, go ahead. Um, but if those kids, if we have two generations that are, believers or engaged in the church and a middle one that's not, then they are on a journey to be disengaged at this point. So, okay, Scott, a couple of reasons that this young adult demographic may not be engaged, in a few ways that maybe we can re-engage and increase that. I would imagine this has landed probably with a lot of our audience this week. So I'm glad you guys were with us. Be sure and check out the Healthy Churches Toolkit at healthychurchestoolkit.com because I think there's a lot of things in there that'll be really helpful for your church in helping to build healthy environments where people can be discipled and engage with one another in the order of discipleship. So that would be a great use of the Healthy Churches Toolkit. If you'd like to reach out to us and connect with one of our certified guides to partner with your church, just go to malphursgroup.com. You can connect with us there. We'd love to do that. Thanks for being with us this week on the Church Revitalization Podcast. We'll see you again next time.